Our group was talking about the way that like 24-hour news cycles shape imagination. Tell people, hey, you're being informed, so then you can go and do the right things, but it all has the logic of the big way. And so we have done things like turning off the news and intentionally staying uninformed according to those certain scripts. Are there better ways to be in touch with what the world is doing and damning itself in its big way practices that don't accept the logic of 24-hour news cycles, staying informed, that kind of stuff? Is there a little way, is there a slow way to be in tune with the big rock we live on?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Christopher. Thanks. If there is, I haven't exactly made my peace with it yet. We still get the physical newspaper. So I've been a very slow adopter. I finally got my first smartphone less than 2 years ago. When it became clear that it was cheaper to do that. But I had a flip phone before that, and before that, no phone at all. So there are ways of course, trying to fast from that. So I guess the way that I deal with it is just get my news from the physical newspaper once a day, and then try to avoid the news the rest of the day. So I'm often the last one to hear about things. And it's not great either, because my first thing in the morning is prayer, and my second thing is breakfast and newspaper, and so I'm serene for about 10 minutes while I'm pouring my Cheerios, and then I'm pissed off by the end of the, by the time I get halfway through the front page section. So I'm not sure that that's entirely healthy either. I feel like I have an obligation to, as an academic, to keep up with what's going on in the world. But I guess the way that I tend to deal with it is to not do 24/7, to just do once a day and do it in kind of slow form. But if anybody else has other suggestions of how they deal with that, I'd be interested to hear.
I don't have a suggestion.
I'll bet you got other suggestions, though, don't you, Steve?
Okay. Bill, thanks so much. I agree with everything you say. I've just copied most of it in a number of books, so thank you for that.
I'm copying you, so it's
one of the criticisms, one of the questions, and it's a legitimate one that I think that we get, is this. Capitalism itself is a kind of laissez-faire, deregulated, anarchic system. So if you don't approach it with certain forms of big way, like state regulations in terms of economics, can you really challenge it? In other words, are we feeding the beast by the simple way, the little way, because we're not doing what needs to be done, and that is, things like minimum wage, new corporate structures, and that's not going, and the CEOs are not going to go gently into that dark night. Mm-hmm. So they're going to require some kind of a big way. How would you respond to that, which I find in many ways very compelling?
And in many ways it is compelling, right? I mean, that's a criticism that I get oftentimes. And the first thing I would say is that you just gotta be, in some ways you gotta do casuistry on these sorts of things. And I think it's not impossible to support minimum wage laws, or at least protest against, the laws that take power away from unions and things like that, right? I mean, the state is there, and there are times when we need to witness to it, right? The problem comes when you think of the state as what is going to save us from the market, right? And part of the problem with that is that it imagines the world as if the state and the market were two different things, right? And they're really not, right? I mean, the state and the market are so densely intertwined. Historically, of course, the market arises because the state makes possible things like, borders and trade agreements and currencies, stable currencies and things like that, international trade through imperialism and all those sorts of things. But that continues today. I mean, today it's an even more dense kind of relationship where, where banks are too big to fail, for example, right? And so they are, because the state and the market are so densely kind of intertwined. So to think that these are two opposing forces is in some ways just an illusion to begin with. And I think we just need to be really realistic about that. And so oftentimes you get like, market is universal and state is local, but of course it's not, right? The state arises by the suppression of local forms of power. And so in some ways globalization is just the latest step in the expansion of the bigness of power. And so I think we just need to be really realistic about that. For every favor that the state is going to do you, they're going to screw you 3 other ways, right? So, yeah. Which isn't to say they don't do you a favor every once in a while, right? That there aren't certain things that can be done, right? The gutting of the EPA, I don't think is a good thing, right? Yeah. I think so. Yeah. No, that's a really interesting question.
Nature of power, right? Oh, whoa, hello. I've been pushing. Speaking of power, yeah, I got the phone. I got the mic now. Bill Cavanaugh. Yeah, because I think there's a way that I'll say it's a puzzle for me thinking about. It seems to me that Jesus redefines power. So my students, so one way this plays out would be white privilege, okay? So my students think, the Euro-American students think, I need to lay down my power. And I'm struck, Jesus never says that. Doesn't say, oh, you shouldn't want to be powerful. Nah, give up power. I don't actually think that's what Jesus is about, but there is a kind of power that is different. Both its ends and its means. And it seems to me also that, ironically, the way that we conceptualize power, often as European Americans with money, is by definition to tell people that don't have money and that sort of power that they actually don't have any power at all. Is that making sense?
Yeah,
and I wonder
so, yeah.
how you reflect in your own experience internationally and in how you think about the power of the so-called poor. Are they powerful? And in what way can Christians see that or understand that in the light of Christ?
Yeah. Thoreau has a definition of freedom where he says a man is free, and he's using the man language, right, 19th century, but he says a person is free insofar according to I'm getting this all. I think it's a person is wealthy according to the number of things he can afford to do without, right? Something like that. And so it's a definition of wealth, but it could be a definition of freedom, right? It's a definition of wealth which defines wealth according to the things that you can do without, right? And that's a certain kind of freedom. So there is certainly a kind of freedom that Ivan Illich, I think, draws on when he talks about the kind of war on subsistence, right? There are some people that are so kind of below the radar of that just don't have anything for other people to extract from them, that they maintain a certain kind of power over their own lives, not to romanticize poverty, but to talk about a kind of dignified subsistence as opposed to the kind of subjecting them to experts who are trying to fix them and improve them. Development can be defined as this kind of 500-year war on people's ability to make a life for themselves, right? And so James Scott has really interesting stuff about this whole section of Southeast and Central Asia that kind of for centuries nobody bothered to govern, and how life was pretty good there until somebody decided they needed to be brought under, they needed to be improved. So yeah, I mean, he's also got that book called Weapons of the Weak, where he says that the usual means of resistance, where people are kind of under the heel of others, poor people, peasant revolts have almost never worked. And the usual methods of resistance are sabotage and foot dragging and non-compliance and those sorts of things. And so there's a certain kind of empowerment in there too. But yeah, so in general, I mean, you look at, there's places in Africa, you asked about kind of internationally, there are places in Africa where the state is basically people, academics talk about failed states, but where it's the church and other people that provide health care and education and roads and those sorts of things. And again, it's not to romanticize poverty, but there is a certain sort of power in being so poor that you don't have anything that other people want to take, right? Which is kind of the Franciscan spirit of poverty too, right? If you don't have anything, then you don't have to use violence to protect it.
Fabulous. Thank you for the talk. My question is about, you said that the little way has at its core the beginning place that we need to change ourselves. So my question is about the little way's ability, to what extent we can expect the little way to actually transform us. I live at the Little Way House of the Bloomington Catholic Worker, so I feel very exposed by this talk. I should say, I feel very seen, very seen. And I guess I'm particularly interested in the question of knowing. You begin, I thought, spoke very much to my condition about the big way thinking is like, I understand this. I know what people in poverty need. I know how to fix the world's problems. Very much that attitude got me into the Catholic Worker movement. That's like why I joined the Catholic Worker.
That's the gateway drug for a lot of us.
I know. And I guess like I've been trying to, in our community, we've been trying to practice the little way I've been in the Catholic Worker for about 20 years now. And I'm still stupid. I'm still kind of an idiot. I still don't understand what causes poverty, what people in poverty really need, what we're doing that's helping, what we're doing that's not helping. So I guess my question is, if the idea is we're supposed to change ourselves, and the little way is powerful, you kind of close by saying the little way can transform economic systems. It's got the power of the atom, right? It's like the atom bomb. So am I, I guess my real question, if I'm being honest, is like, am I just doing it wrong? Or is it realistic to expect the practice of the little way to solve these problems on a personal level, to solve our problem of knowing, to solve our problem of belief? Or is the result of practicing the little way just more humility that we're naturally not very good at it. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's a question for God, not me, right? What the hell is it? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so, right. So, but the thing about, that I was talking about collective guilt, I think, is really important here too, because I don't think there's ever a point at which you can say, well, I've changed, right? I mean, which is not to say that we can't ever change, right? But there has to be a certain kind of mystery and humility to that about how God is working on us. And you work out your salvation in fear and trembling, and in recognition that we're never going to be getting it right. Exactly, right? We're always on the verge of failing, and that's a really important part, I think, of change, is the sense of this kind of penitential practice, that we're just not ever good enough to declare ourselves, immune from these kinds of temptations. And so I take it that your question is not just about can we, that we can't go out and not only can we go out and not go out and change the world, but we can't also just go out and change ourselves, right? And I think there's a certain way in which that's true. So maybe what I said at the end about changing ourselves first sounded a little bit too optimistic as opposed to hopeful, right? Yeah, I mean, I do think that we can change, right? But I think it's because God can change us, and not through our own sort of efforts to now I've got in other words, I guess another way of saying this is that the little way is not a technique, right? Nobody's going to write a how-to guide on the little way, right? Yeah.
Got me. Thank you, Bill.